Hey, boys and girls. So today we are going to read a new chapter in The Thief of Always, and it's called Turnabout, and it's chapter 11. And usually turnabout means a change in direction. So I wonder what the direction change will be for us. And I figured I'd remind us all to use a notice and note strategy to ask a question. And what I mean by that is that we have all these lovely signposts. We have contrast and contradictions when the character does or says something opposite to what we would expect, right? We ask ourselves, why is the character doing that? An aha moment when a character realizes or understands or finally figures something out. How might this change things? A tough question, right? When the character is asking themselves a question, and what does this question make me wonder? And then there's some other ones, words of the wiser, again and again, and a memory moment. And so I encourage you, since we've been using these all year, to think about asking questions as I read. What does it mean that there's a turnabout? What do we discover? Use a notice and note strategy to ask a question, okay? And I'm thinking contrast, contradiction, aha moment, and tough question are the three that are most likely to hit home for this chapter. But I could be wrong. Try and catch me out, guys and girls. Neither Wendell nor Lulu was around the following day. Mrs. Griffin said she'd seen them both before breakfast, and then they'd disappeared. So Harvey was left to his own devices. He tried not to think about what had happened the night before, but he couldn't help himself. Snatches of conversation kept coming back, and he puzzled over them all day long. What had Jives meant, for instance, when he told Harvey that turning him into a vampire was not so much a game as an education? What kind of lessons had he learned by jumping off a roof and scaring Wendell? Lots of tough questions there. And all that stuff about soul eaters and how they had to be served, what had that meant? Was it Mr. Hood that Jive had been speaking of, that great power they all had to serve? If Hood was somewhere in the house, why hadn't anyone, Lulu, Wendell, or himself, encountered him? Harvey had quizzed his friends about Hood and had the same story from them both. They'd heard no footfalls, no whispers, no laughter. If Mr. Hood was indeed here, where was he hiding, and why? So many questions, so few answers. And then, as if these mysteries weren't enough, another came along to vex him. In the late afternoon, lounging in the shade of the treehouse, he heard a yell of frustration and peered through the leaves to see Wendell racing across the lawn. He was dressed in a windbreaker and boots, even though it was sweltering hot, and he was stamping around like a madman. Harvey shouted to him, but his call went either unheard or ignored, so he climbed down and pursued Wendell across the side of the house. He found him in the orchard, red-faced and sweaty. "What's going on?" he said. "I can't get out," Wendell said, grinding a half-rotted apple underfoot. "I want to leave, Harvey, but there's no way out." "Of course there is." "I've been trying for hours and hours, and I tell you, the mist keeps sending me back the way I came." "Hey, calm down." "I want to go home, Harvey," Wendell said, close to tears now. "Last night was too much for me. That thing came after my blood. I know you don't believe me." "I do," said Harvey. "Honest, I do." "You do?" "For sure." "Well, then maybe you should leave too, 'cause if I go, it'll come after you." "I don't think so," said Harvey. "I've been kidding myself about this place," Wendell said. "It's dangerous." "Oh yeah, I know, it seems like everything's perfect, but..." Harvey interrupted him. "Maybe you should keep your voice down," he said. "We should talk about this quietly, in private." "Like where?" said Wendell, wild-eyed. "The whole place is watching us and listening to us. Don't you feel it?" "Why would it do that?" "I don't know," Wendell snapped, "but last night I thought, if I don't leave, I'm going to die here. I'll just disappear one night, or go crazy like Lulu." He dropped his voice to a whisper. "We're not the first, you know. What about all the clothes upstairs? All the coats and shoes and hats? They belong to kids like us. Harvey shuddered. Had he played trick or treat in a murdered boy's shoes? I want to get out of here, Wendell said, tears running down his face. But there's no way out. If there's a way in, there must be a way out, Harvey reasoned. We'll go to the wall. With that, he marched off, Wendell in tow. Around to the front of the house and down the gentle slope of the lawn. The mist wall looked perfectly harmless as they approached it. Be careful, Wendell warned. It's got some tricks up its sleeves. Harvey slowed his step, expecting the wall to twitch or even reach for him, but it did nothing. Bolder now, he strode into the mist, fully expecting to emerge on the other side. But by some trick or other, he was turned around without even being aware of it and delivered out of the wall with the house in front of him. What happened? He said to himself, puzzled. He stepped back into the mist. The same thing occurred. In he went and out he came, facing the opposite direction. He tried again and again and again, but the same trick was working upon him every time, until Harvey was as frustrated as Wendell had been a half hour before. Now, do you believe me? Wendell said. Yep. So what do we do? Well, we don't yell about it, Harvey whispered. We just get on with the day. Pretend we've given up leaving. I'm going to do a little looking around. He began his investigation as soon as they got back into the house, by going in search of Lulu. Her bedroom door was closed. He knocked, then called to her. There was no reply, so he tried the handle. The door was unlocked. Lulu, he called. It's Harvey. She wasn't there, but he was relieved to see that her bed had been slept in and that she'd apparently been playing with her pets recently. The doors to the doll's house were open and the lizards were everywhere underfoot. There was one strangeness, however. The sound of running water led him through to the bathroom, where he found the bath full almost to the brim and Lulu's clothes scattered in puddles on the tile. Have you seen Lulu? He asked Mrs. Griffin when he got downstairs. Not in the last few hours, she replied, but she's been keeping to herself. Mrs. Griffin looked hard at Harvey. I wouldn't pay too much mind if I were you, child, she said. Mr. Hood doesn't like inquisitive guests. I was only wondering where she got to, Harvey said. Mrs. Griffin frowned, her tongue working against the pale cheek as though it wanted to speak but didn't dare. Anyway, Harvey went on, deliberately goading Miss Griffin, I don't believe Mr. Hood exists. Now you be careful, she said, her voice and frown deepening. You don't want to talk about Mr. Hood that way. I've been here days and days, Harvey said, realizing as he spoke that he'd lost count of his time in the house, and I haven't seen him once. Where is he? Now Mrs. Griffin came at Harvey with her hands raised, and for a moment he thought she was going to strike him, but instead she took hold of his shoulders and shook him. Please, child, she said, be content with what you know. You're here to enjoy yourself for a little time, and child, it's such a little time. It flies by. Oh, Lord, how it flies. It's just a few weeks, Harvey said. I'm not going to stay here forever. Now, it was he who stared at her, or am I? He said. Stop, she told him. You think I'm here forever, don't you? He said, shaking off her grip. What is this place, Mrs. Griffin? Is it some kind of prison? She shook her head. Don't tell me lies, he said. It's stupid. We're locked up in here, aren't we? Now, though she was shaking with fear from head to foot, she dared to make a tiny nod of her head. All of us? He asked. Again she nodded. You too? Yes, she whispered. Me too. And there's no way out. Believe me, if you try to escape again, Karna will come after you. Karna, he said, remembering the name of the conversation between Jive and Mar. He's up there, Mrs. Griffin said, on the roof. That's where the four of them live. Rictus, Mar, Karna, and Jive. You know, I've met them all but Karna. Pray you never do, said Mrs. Griffin. Now listen to me, Harvey. I've seen many children come and go through this house, some of them foolish, some of them selfish, some of them sweet, some brave. But you are one of the brightest souls I have ever set eyes on. I want you to take what joy you can from being here. Use the hours well, because there'll be fewer than you think. Harvey listened patiently to this. Then, when she'd finished, he said, I still want to meet Mr. Hood. Mr. Hood is dead, Mrs. Griffin said, exasperated by his persistence. Dead, you swear? I swear, she replied. On the grave of my poor Clue Cat, I swear. Mr. Hood is dead, so don't ask about him ever again. This was the first time Mrs. Griffin had ever come close to giving Harvey an order, and though he wanted to press her further, he decided not to. Instead, he said he was sorry for bringing up the subject and wouldn't do it again, then left her to her secret sorrows. My heavens, I think we just got an earful. What is that all about? Where is it going to go from here? So again, I hope you asked yourself some tough questions, contrast and contradiction, an aha moment, because we saw a lot of different pieces happening there that could cause us to ask questions and get some answers about what we're reading. And that, after all, is our goal. So remember to read and jot. I'll catch up with you next time. Bye.